Begin today the study of Parshat Vayakhel as we look towards the end of the book of Shmot. And Vayakhel, of course, starts with the word Vayakhel. From the word we know, Kihila Kahal. Vayakhel Moshe Kol Adat B'nai Yisrael. Moshe assembles the entire nation. Now, part of what's strange about this is that Moshe is constantly calling the nation, but we don't have this idea of this Kihila, Vayakhel, of Moshe calling everybody together. But we have to remember is we're in the aftermath of the Egel HaZahav, the aftermath of the golden calf, where the nation was fractured, where the people were split, where Moshe comes down and he says, Mila Hashem Elai, and 3,000 Levi, and the Levites gathered together with him and kill, I think it was 3,000 people. We have a lot of difficulty. And so if we're going to try to rebuild holiness, if we're going to try to rebuild that Mishkan, we have to rebuild the community first. Before constructing a sanctuary, we have to try to get back some sense of national unity. I'm not saying it's going to be like Chazal say, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, that at Har Sinai we were K'ish Echad Belev Echad, as Rashi cites the Midrash, that we're all one heart, one person together. But we have to, what we're able to do, or what Moshe understands that we need to do, is we need to really gather all of the people together and try to psychologically move forward from the golden calf. And this begins sort of a, I would say, structural observation about the beginning of this week's parsha. So, right, we have the attempt at national unity, Vayakhel. And then what we have, and we'll talk about these ideas in a second also, is we start to talk about Shabbat. And then we start to talk about the Truma again, the giving of the materials to the Beit HaMikdash. So we have sort of the national unity. Then we have what we might want to call limits on creativity. Shabbat, right? God creates for 6 days, and the 7th day God rests. Shabbat is the limitation on creativity. And then we have the personal giving, the voluntary giving. So institutions can only be built after we have unity. Shabbat represents in many ways the idea of restraint. We have to restrain from certain things, even though they might be great things. You might be working on an amazing project. When Shabbat starts, you have to stop. Doesn't mean the project is not great. Can't write Sefer Torah on Shabbat. Shmuel doesn't write a Sefer Torah on Shabbat, not because there's something wrong with writing a Sefer Torah. There's restraint and personal investment. Right? You have to be willing to give. Only afterwards do we get back to the detailed building. So the Parsha moves in a very specific order here in the beginning, and let's talk a little bit more about some of those ideas. Now, what we have here in Psukim Bet through Gimel is, again, Shabbat. Now, we had earlier, this is not the first time that we have the idea of Shabbat here and towards the end of Sefer Shmot. We had it back in Parshat Kitisa. There it was after the Mishkan. We had Mishkan and then Shabbat. Now we have Shabbat and Mishkan. There are those who say that maybe it has to do with a hierarchy, sacred time comes before the Mishkan, and others who say, interestingly, that we're here again, we're living in the aftermath of the golden calf. The golden calf, you might say, was a religious impulse. Moshe's not here. We don't know what happened to Moshe. We need Moshe. We need something to communicate with God. So we'll build this golden calf. We'll build something as a way, as a method to communicate with God. The intentions may not have been bad with the golden calf. It's not clear. It's a story that's shrouded in mystery with all sorts of different questions the commentaries ask about it. But part of what it's showing, and we'll see this later, of course, with Nadav and Avihu, with Aaron's 2 sons, is that not every religious idea is something that should be done. There needs to be restraint. So here, Shabbat before Mishkan, one could say, is trying to tell us that idea. You want to write a Sefer Torah, 14 Sefer Torah, that's amazing. But you're not going to write it on Shabbat, because there are times when we're not supposed to be creative. There are times where we have to have restraint. There has to be sacred time, one could say here, before sacred space, before making the sacred object. So here we have Mishkan prior. Now, specifically, what is it that we're told not to do here? Lo tivaruesh b'chol moshvei techem b'yom HaShabbat. We're not supposed to create a fire. Fire, we know, is the central tool of creation of building things. Heat, fire, right? When we're talking about things like metal work and smelting and making materials for the Mishkan. And so the Torah is highlighting the human creative power must stop on Shabbat. Right? That's what's being said here. It's that restraint. It's a good thing to be creative, to have a fire so you can cook and make delicious meals that everybody can enjoy and be around together. It's wonderful to use fire to build beautiful materials, but on Shabbat we cannot do that. We have to move away from this idea, even though it is a very significant and important idea. Going ahead a couple more verses, we have the odd phrase that's used, Kuchu meitchem truma laHashem. Take from yourselves, is a literal understanding, a contribution for God, right? Usually it would say to bring or to give. But what part of what is being said here is that the notion is we're not just giving an object in the Mishkan. The whole point of the Mishkan is to have God next to us. And if we want to have God next to us, then what we need is giving of ourselves. It's not giving of an object. It's not divorcing ourselves from the object that's given. I'm giving myself. I'm giving something. I'm giving of myself. I'm not just contributing an object. I'm part of this project. This is who take something from yourself. If we think about generally just about giving, one person can give, $200,000 could be meaningless because they might be worth $1 billion. And some person can give $20 and that could be amazing. They might say, okay, I'm not going to have coffee this week or something by my giving of $20. So the real act here, is giving of yourself. And from these same words, we have sort of a similar notion that this is also reflecting that change after the Egel Hazahav. Before the Egel Hazav, before the sin, it was a divine command almost, right? God comes to Moshe. And yes, it's Nediv Lev. We talked about at the time, it has to be people who are giving voluntarily. It's not forced. It's not coercive. It's not Egypt where we're building because we're forced to be building. It's the opposite of that. We spoke about at length. But here it's saying it. Moshe's gathering the people and he's saying to them, to give, it's a national act of generosity and participation. The repair of the relationship must come from the people themselves. It's coming from me, right? If you sin, if you hurt somebody else, you do something wrong to somebody else, then what you need to do is you need to try to correct that. And you can't wait for them to come to you. You have to go to them. So Moshe gathers Kol Adat B'nai Yisrael, all the entire assembly of Israel, and now we need to go and we need to try to repair the relationship with God, and that's the hope here at the beginning of the parsha. So the general, sort of way that again we can look at this is we're going from national unity to limits on creativity, and then personal giving. And hopefully, if we understand those limits following the golden calf, and if we understand the idea of personal giving, that it has to come from us, that will help with the repairing of the relationship. Now, you may say that Moshe already repaired the relationship. Moshe went up a second time. Moshe went up a third time. Moshe got God. I'm going to still be here. I'm not just going to send your angel. And those things are all correct. Those things are not incorrect. Those things are very much correct. And Moshe has helped to repair the relationship. Moshe has held back God's fury and God's anger. But to fully repair the relationship, the people have to go and do something. They have to move in to fix and to prepare the relationship with God. That's what needs to be done here. And that's the beginning, I believe, of Parshat Vayakhel, is really trying to get back to that. Right? One of the great questions we have to ask at the end of the book of Shemot, right? We have now sort of the second section about the Mishkan. We have the first section, and now we have the second section of the Mishkan. And maybe it's told to us again in detail because this is about now the repairing of the relationship. It might not have happened. The golden calf could have put an end to the idea of the Mishkan, but it hasn't put an idea to the end of the Mishkan. And I'll finish with this, with something that I don't know if I've said this. It's at some point in time. It's something that may have been obvious to everybody but me for many years. One of the tractates in the Talmud is Tractate Gittin. Gittin is the tractate of divorce. It's the technical laws, how many lines in the divorce document have to be written, whether you can hand it to your spouse who then become your ex-spouse yourself, or with the messenger, how you have to hand it, who you have to hand it, etc. All sorts of the different details therein. In Masechet Gittin, like in many of the tractates of the Talmud, we have also stories and legends, what we'll call Agadatot, stories. And in Masechet Gittin are many of the stories surrounding the destruction of the Second Temple. Stories of the great Jews, the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, the fight that this man has with the wrong person who was invited to his party, and the rabbis watch it and don't do anything about it, and the person brings a sacrifice that has a blemish on it, which can't be brought to the temple, and as a result of that, the Talmud says, because of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and because of these rabbis who were unwilling and couldn't figure out what to do, the temple was destroyed. All of these stories and terrible stories surrounding the destruction of the Second Temple are in Masechet Gittin. And I finally realized this, which might be obvious to everybody else at some point this year, is that in Masechet Gittin, we have the stories of the destruction of the temple, because the destruction of the temple is like a divorce between God and the Jewish people. But what's important is there is a law in Jewish life called machzir grushato, that a person, just because you're divorced, does not mean you can't get remarried. And part of the idea of placing the stories of the destruction of the temple in Masechet Gittin is the destruction of the first temple, destruction of the second temple, in a sense, are like a divorce between God and the Jewish people. But the divorce is not forever. The get is not forever in our relationship with God. And that's why I'm saying it here within the Mishkan. We have the commands. We have everything. We're starting to get everything to put together to build the Mishkan. And then what happens? A rupture, destruction, the golden calf. The relationship between God and the Jewish people seems to be destroyed. And God wants to get rid of the Jewish people. And Moshe pleads and pleads and pleads and argues. And God says, fine. And here we have the healing of that relationship. And that's why we have now the second, you could say, one of the reasons and explanations, the second time around, the building of the Mishkan. And it's the aftermath of the golden calf. And so we should all have wonderful relationships without terrible ruptures. What the Torah is trying to say here is a small fight or even a terrible rupture, hopefully if it's not a toxic relationship, can be in many ways repaired. And that's what we're doing in the aftermath of the golden calf with, again, the Mishkan being built.